Greetings YouTube, Captain Machine here, back for another video, and now that I've got all the Slandership stuff out of the way, I thought it'd be a good time to interact with the RPG Brigade, as the Gentleman Gaming calls it, and I like to now call it as well, and see if I can get myself involved in these discussions and churn up some ideas. And the first one that's been doing the rounds recently, the one I've noticed, shall we say, is the lethality conversation, or lethality, continuity and character death. And listening to a fair few people have their comments on that, it's proven to be quite entertaining. Not only because some people have diametrically opposed opinions to me, which is fine, not a problem at all with that, but also to hear the explanations for it and how they come to that conclusion. And when they explain themselves, even if they may say something I don't agree with, I understand why they think it that way, and that makes that opinion much more malleable to me. I'm not saying I agree with it, but you know, great. Basically, lethality, character death and continuity are kind of the most complicated question I've ever been asked, or I'm not being asked it, but I've ever seen asked, and I'd like to give a crack at answering. Right, first of all, when it comes to lethality, it for me depends on the game, and it depends on the mindset of the group. I can't remember who mentioned this last, and this may have just been a podcast supposed to someone on the YouTube, but if you're running a high lethality game, then you owe it to your players to explain that to them before they get started, so they can prepare themselves for it. And this may be something as simple as buying the toughness feat in Pathfinder, or taking the brawny edge, or whatever it's called. What's the opposite of flaws in darkness? Yeah, you get the idea. Taking talents, edges or builds which give them more survivability. Buying sound constitution in Dark Heresy, for example. So if they know they're going to get crap thrown at them, a lot of, then they can prepare for that so that they don't think they're going to die as quickly. And you owe that to your players to tell them that. There are certain games which inherently say that, or you may think they do, but for some players they don't. For example, Death Watch. You play as Space Marines. You flat out, in my honest opinion, with that game are expected to fight a lot. And not only fight a lot against basic troopers, but really big and nasty things. Because after all, when the Imperial Guard, with all its infantry, all its tanks, all of its aerial bombardments, can't kill it, then they send in the Space Marines. And that's the level of difficulty you're going to get thrown against. You stuff that the Imperial Guard, the billion-plus infantry army that's spread across the galaxy, can't deal with all of its firepower, then they send you in. But despite that, you still owe it to your player to tell them that you intend to run a lethal game, if that is your intention. And the same goes for Call of Cthulhu. If you intend to run a lethal game of Call of Cthulhu, let your players know. So if I say, for example, I'm going to be running, I'm not running around, but if I was going to run, say, Master Nyarlathotep, I'll say to my guys, I'm going to run Master Nyarlathotep. Pre-warning, this adventure tends to be a little bit of a meat grinder. It's not very forgiving. I'll do my best to counteract that, but you are likely to go through a couple of characters going through this adventure. And if they don't like that idea, then they can turn around to me and say, actually, Neil, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe let's play something else, because Taz the King has proven to us, which I'm going to do a review of very shortly, that you don't need to grind characters to dust to have a good story when Call of Cthulhu. And can't you run something like that? And I would say, yes, I can. But I'm not going to assume that's what they want until I ask them. That's the key thing, really. You need to get your understanding of what the players expect from your game, because after all, it's a shared experience. It's not just about the GM, it's not just about the one or two players at the table, it's about everybody. Ultimately it's a game, and I can't remember again who said this, I think it's off the podcast, but the ultimate goal of the game is to have fun. If you're not having fun, you have lost the game. And that applies to everyone around the table. And if you're the one person in the group that has an issue with any aspect of the game, you really should bring that up with everybody, not just the GM, not just one of the players, so that your opinions can be directly either challenged or influence the group or things like that, and maybe you can understand the mindset of why other people like this type of game which you've originally not liked. I am going way off topic here, so I do apologise, guys, and this is going to be a long video. I can feel it already. I haven't even started. Right, okay, guys, so that's the first thing, because especially in Call of Cthulhu, shall we say, which is traditionally a high lethal game, I don't think it has to be highly lethal. For example, the last played character I played in Call of Cthulhu was a painter who stubbornly refused to take anything related to a combat skill whatsoever. I think I got a tick in kick because I tried to kick a cultist downstairs when I got attacked by one, and I got a little bit of an upgrade, but I never used it again. Never ever was any violent to anybody. I was like rude to them, because that was what I did. I was rude, and I would bibble a lot and talk to cats, despite the fact that cats would not talk back to me. And I enjoyed playing the Descent into Madness. And I suppose before I go on to the other issues of character death and continuity, I should address Call of Cthulhu in the fact it's one of the more unique games in the fact is that your character death can be something other than dying. It can be going insane, because going insane is as good a character death. It still takes your character off you, it still ends your personal story, and it could be used as a for the future. Maybe you'd escape the asylum you were put into and you've decided that with your zero insanity that actually Cthulhu had it right all along and you're going to help bring him back, and you could become an adversary to the rest of the PCs. But for the majority of cases, when you hit zero sanity, your character is dead. He's not actually dead, he's just out of the game. And in my opinion, when you're insane or dead, they're both the same thing, because it ends that story. Potentially you could bring an insane character back, but you wouldn't want to. Unless your gym was very, very lenient when it came to sanity recovery in a sanatorium. Because if you go by the book, it takes a long time to get a very small amount of sanity back, and playing a low sanity character is just basically going to get him back in the asylum again. I've seen it happen, can't argue with it. And then again, obviously the player might turn around and say, actually I don't want to play Raving Madman, I'd rather play someone with a bit more, well, a bit more sane, basically. And can't blame them for that. You know, if a character's so far in the deep end that, you know, he's painting monsters and cities and he's talking to cats and all the rest of it, you might not want to. You might want to play that. You might want to play the guy who has his doctor flummox his chemistry wrong, give him way too much opium to the point where he's now addicted to the stuff, horribly so. You might want to play that. I've seen people play that. I fully expected at some point those characters to turn around one day and say, actually I don't want to play this character anymore, and I would not have batted an eyelid. But if they're happy to play that character, then more power to them, because that's how they derive their fun. Right, I see I've got a circular thing going on there. Yes. Okay, so that's lethality. Basically, to summarise before we go on to anything else, it's about consensus. You need to make sure the rest of the group is happy with the lethality before you introduce it, and go from there. I've seen like Tetsubo tell me that he kills people for making stupid decisions. I'm a firm believer in things like that. However, I've seen people be firm believers of killing player characters with poison traps when they just found a random chest in the middle of a dungeon that had nothing to do with the plot, and the contents had nothing to do with the plot, and they still kill a character. And me personally, I don't write adventures like that anymore. I used to, back in the day, now I don't. When it comes to continuity, I was discussing this with my friends a few weeks ago when this topic first came up on YouTube, and I got some really interesting opinions, so we bounced a couple of ideas back, and it cemented my opinion on the subject. And back in the day when I first started GMing, and I was getting more into the actual role-playing element of it, other than, you know, role-playing, you know, where you just roll the dice. I should actually put words down there, but I might not do. Which tell the difference. Basically, one is spelt R-O-L-E and one's spelt R-O-L-L. It's a play on words. It looks much better on a forum than it does on that YouTube. Basically, when I was going from playing the dice to playing the character, I wanted to make more in-depth plots, and I fell into the newbie trap, shall we say, of regular GMs, and this is a cautionary tale to most newbie GMs out there, and maybe some experienced ones who may not realise this is going on. But try not to pin your entire campaign on 1 or 2 player characters. You may find that 1 or 2 player characters in your group gets the whole role-playing thing more. They present you with an interesting character, they've got an interesting background. You look at it and you can see a malleable campaign evolving behind it. Maybe they're playing, I don't know, a dwarven lord who's seeking vengeance for treachery, or they're playing a rogue trader whose brother killed the entirety of the dynasty apart from him by ripping their ship out of the warp and infesting it with demons, and he got away. Or maybe you're playing, you know, a Ventru who wants to take over New York, and that is fantastic because you can really build campaigns off of that, which have really long-lasting fun, good beginning, middle, and end. And you can see that forming ahead of you. And I used to do that. I used to take 1 or 2 people's ideas around the table, mash them into the main plotline to the point where it became the main plotline, because that was the most entertaining. It was more entertaining than the stuff I had envisioned, and so usually it worked until somebody died. Now, if it was just one of the, I hate to say backup characters, which is kind of using the whole like singing scene where you've got your main singer and your backup singers over here somewhere. But when you're basing a campaign around 1 or 2 PCs, everybody else is a backup character. They've just been relegated, and it may be an offensive term to some people, and I wouldn't be surprised if you felt that way on the subject, because it kind of is, and that's one of the things I learned not to do. But if one of your backup characters dies, so what? You can recruit new guys. It's not a problem. You know, you can go to the tavern and put a notice up. You can, if you're playing Dark Heresy, you can go around the slums and pick up a new scum that proves to be particularly proficient in his task and may have a shred of loyalty to the Emperor. If you're playing Call of Cthulhu, you could get that history professor you were talking to a few sessions back. Maybe you could present him with an artifact which proves some of his theories might be right, the ones he was just tossing around as an idea, and he goes, oh, I'm more interested in that now, maybe I can come along with you and find more of these artifacts. You know, and you can do that, and that's kind of how you introduce players anyway when it comes to this sort of thing. But when your main character dies, the one you built the entire campaign around, your campaign's over. It's gone. You can try and force it by having the rest of the backup characters begrudgingly take the plot that that main character was running with and just keep running with it. But that's not what they're there for. You know, you could argue that some people are Indians and some are, you know, chiefs. You know, some are followers and some are leaders. But ultimately, it's a group effort. It has to be a group effort. Even in when I play Werewolf, you always... Oh, here we go. Yeah. Sorry about the chair, guys. You get a new one. If you're playing Werewolf, you have a pack alpha. If you don't, you're going to get frowned upon quite quickly by the whole guru community. That doesn't mean to say that the alpha... Oh my god, my lighting is terrible. Let me just check that 1 second. That's not helping at all. Better. Sorry, guys. Even if your pack alpha is the pack alpha for one reason or another, and the rest of the group is happy with that, that doesn't mean they're backup characters. It just means that one group character has been assigned the role of decision maker, or arbitrator, or whatever term you want to use for the role. It doesn't mean say he's the primary NPC. It doesn't mean to say the plot has to revolve around him. And this is the conclusion I came to with my friends. I didn't say I came to this by myself, because if I did, I'd be a much smarter man than I actually am. This took a group effort to find. And it's when you're crafting a story, particularly when it comes to adversarial stories like a bad guy, your goal really as a GM should not be to base it on one character, unless you are playing like a 1 or 2 player campaign, at which point more power to you. But you should base it on the group. So at the moment I'm running a Pathfinder game, which I'm going to talk about at some point in the future and do a campaign synopsis on, because Season 1 has ended and Season 2 is about to start tomorrow. And that's how I kind of run campaigns nowadays, because long, winding campaigns are something that I can't mentally do anymore. I haven't been able to do it for a long time, and I think I was kidding myself and I thought I could do it this time, so I've kind of realised that that's the case, and we just put it in seasons, and that's kind of how I've evolved as a GM now. And I've invented this adversary called the Shadowmancer, who is ironically a Shadowmancer, so I probably didn't think that name through very well, but I thought it was nice at the time, and the guy seemed to have stuck with it and run with it, so that's cool. And when I've built him, basically his plans are getting foiled by the group as a whole. Not by one person in the group, by the group as a whole. So he hates the group as a whole. So if that group suffers a casualty, or some attrition or retirement of a character, and they replace it, the group as a whole still exists. Although I must admit, I haven't actually got them to give me a name for the party. But we'll get there eventually. I think actually I might bring that up tomorrow. But let's just say we'll call them, I don't know, Lita's Dungeoneers, as a random throw-in name. So the Shadowmancer hates Lita's Dungeoneers. He doesn't hate individual members of the group. He might, Lita, as its founding member, might not even exist anymore. But he hates Lita's Dungeoneers, because Lita's Dungeoneers keep screwing him over. And that's what drives him to confront them, and to attack them, and to engage them as a bad guy. And that is great. That's ultimately, my honest opinion, how you deal with continuity. You don't intervene plots with one particular character. You kind of have to do it to the whole group. I suppose the really big question when it comes to continuity, which I've been dodging around quite unprofessionally, is how do you introduce new player characters? I remember we've just watched Gentleman Gamers answer this particular question. He says, what do you do if you're in a dungeon, in a jungle, where no man has set foot for 1,000 years, And I thought to myself, it came to me, it's like, well, something has to live there. It doesn't have to be human. It might be a boggard, which are frog people basically. It might be some kind of fae. It might be a lizard man. There might be a whole tribe of them. He might be exiled from the tribe for being too nice, for having conflicting opinions to the rest of the tribe. What a wonderful opportunity to roleplay something different than just a human. Obviously, if your player characters aren't really into that, then you are going to have to work your way around it quite a lot. But if you've got an open-minded group, thinking creatively outside the box is some of the most entertaining stuff ever. Maybe the next room has a divine potion in it, which the familiar runs over, picks up and drinks, and the familiar instantly is no more familiar anymore. He's now a sentient character with levels. Maybe mimicking the levels of his mentor, so he's a wizard or something like that, or a witch or whatever other characters have familiars. And that's your new player character right there. It's the talking raven in the corner or something. Maybe people might be up for playing that. I'm not saying that everyone would be, and I could see why people wouldn't be. But it gives you the opportunity to continue the story. Because I'm not a huge fan of leaving people up to dry. I've seen people turn up to games after their characters killed at the end of the last game and sit there for the entire session waiting for the GM to introduce them. And it's the dullest thing ever. It's even worse when you want to interact with it, because you've been actively participating with this story for months, weeks, years, whatever, and you want to interact with this particular chapter of the story. That's what role-playing is about. It's about writing the story as you interact with it. And it's infuriating not to be able to do that. I am of this opinion that role-playing is not a spectator sport. There are exceptions to rules, and there's some great guys out there at MP3 RPG and also at Lethality who actually put out some really good audio material of people playing games, and it's entertaining because they've gone to efforts to make it entertaining. I don't think sitting in the corner of the room I play in and watching my group role play while I do nothing is entertaining. I don't. I wouldn't be happy about the situation, and nor would I expect anyone else to be. So I would do my darndest to get those players back into the group as fast as humanly possible. To which point I'll actually take them to one side and say, look, I want to get you back in. These are some of the ideas I've just cooked up in my head. What do you have any counter proposals to make? You know, it could just be something as contrived as a teleporting mistake, malfunction, where somebody hired a wizard to teleport them to a particular place, and he'd horribly flummoxed the roll, and he ended up in a random place, which happened to be where the PCs are. You know, it's contrived, and it's stupid, it's a bit of Deus Ex, but it gets the game running again. And you could, you know, depending on how much you want to ham it up, you could really run with this material. It's like, I'm going to get that wizard, I'm going to get my money back. I paid 5,000 gold pieces to get teleported to Winter Deep, and where the hell am I now? God, that sounds a bit good, isn't it? But you get the idea. That's how I treat continuity in this particular subject. And I suppose the shortest of all three of them is character death. So when it comes to character death, I am a bit of a... I've become an open rolling GM. I used to be behind the screen all the time. I used to love being behind the screen all the time, rolling my dice behind the screen, and to some extent I still do. If I've got a GM screen, I've got an example around here? No, I don't. I do have this example. Here we go. Here's the werewolf GM screen. Lovely 4-panel GM screen. It's a really nice cardstock. It's a beautiful GM screen, and the stuff in here is actually useful. I'm going to have to do some reviews on GM screens because there's some really bad ones out there, and you'd be surprised which ones I think are the bad ones. But I'm starting to not like this because this is a viewpoint for a group is a bit 1980s, 1990s. Definitely not in the 2000s, and definitely not in the 2010s. Do I want to be staring at this GM screen all day with my GM popping over it like some bloody Snoopy cartoon? You know, I don't want that. To which point there are now some GM screens which are like that, which means that I can't stare over it unless I'm really getting close down to the bottom of the table. I'm starting to like the idea of GM screens which are landscape because it still obscures the notes, and it still obscures the fine note taking that goes involved with that, so people can't see maps and stuff, but it presents less of a barrier. So when I'm playing a game like this where it has a big, there we go, there's Pathfinders, it has a big screen like this, I don't like using these anymore. I have them on me because I'd much rather do this than go through the rule book, because the route usually, if it's well built, and this one is a particularly good one actually, there's one table in here which I thought they could have cut out. Yeah, there's one table in here I thought they could have cut out, and the rest of it I really, really, really do like, and I think that's going to be my next video, or next couple of videos anyway. But I'd much rather have this to hand as a note-taking material. So someone gets nauseated in the group. Nauseated creatures can only take move action and cannot attack, cast spells, or concentrate. There we go. I've not had to look through the rulebook. That's what I use this for nowadays. I don't use it as a barrier to me and the players, so I tend to roll open, and I'm getting off topic a lot. So when I roll that crit, and I roll that 60 odd points of damage to a character that's got 30 odd points, he's dead. Everyone knows he's dead, there's no argument, there's no thing. And I suppose you have to have this element of potential death in your game. You can't not have it, in my opinion, because to have drama, or for drama to exist, you have to have conflict. And when it comes to, in the Dungeons & Dragons game, for example, that conflict has to be the possibility of death. I'd much rather not have the player characters die in a random bar fight in the middle of nowhere for no apparent reason, but sometimes it happens, especially if they're not careful. and I want to give the world something of reality. I mean, I've never been a huge fan of killing player characters for the longest time. Back when we first started playing, yeah, we all went through that phase of killing as many player characters as humanly possible. And to be honest with you, I might go back to doing stuff like that if I ever pick up a retro game. You know, one of those like clones of AD&D or D&D First Edition. I might go back to the whole, you know, killing everyone off as fast as humanly possible, throwing in killer dungeons and meat grinder scenarios. But for the time being, I think role-playing as a hobby for both me and as an industry has evolved to the point where actually no, it's not fun to do that anymore. Unless everyone's on board for that kind of torture, basically, 'cause that's what it is. I mean, even with Warhammer, which is notoriously lethal, because everyone does almost the same damage. From goblins to humans to chaos knights. Everyone kind of does the same damage with a couple of variables. It's a d10 plus your strength. And that d10, if it rolls a 10, can crit and keep critting until you're dead. You know, you can get stabbed in the heart by a goblin on its first attack in the first game of the first combat of the first round. It can happen. I've seen it happen. And you have to have that in order to make the game feel real. If you are playing a game and you realise that your GM will not let you die, and you are effectively bulletproof, you start doing stupid things. I've seen that too. I've seen it where a player actually took offence to the fact that he couldn't die, because no matter how stupid he was being, his GM would keep him alive, and started doing suicidal things, just to see how far he was prepared to stretch it. Not the most mature way of dealing with it, I must admit, and if I had seen that nowadays, I would have addressed it as a player or as a GM and said, is there any particular reason why you're doing this? Are you unhappy with the game? Are you unhappy with the character? And gone from there. But I've seen it happen, and it wouldn't surprise me if I see it happen again in the future. So I suppose there's a cautionary tale to that as well. But going out of my way to deliberately kill player characters, not a huge fan of it. I've accidentally done it sometimes, like for example, when I was running the high-level D&D game, which ran from like 1st to 22nd level. About level 17, they went into this very necromancy-themed dungeon, full of vampires and undead and all the rest of it. And there was a ruined trap on the floor, a death room, which required like a saving throw of DC 20 or you die. I suppose at that level it's not so bad, because by that level people have access to wishes and resurrections and so on and so forth. But if you threw that at a level 5 party, or a level 2 party, or level 1 party, don't expect any favours off your group for doing that. They're not going to like you for it. Unless it's blatantly obvious that there is a death room right there on the floor, and they go, you know what? Even with my flummox roll on Knowledge Arcana, that looks like a death rune. I think if you stand on that, you die. You know, if you tell them that, and it's there, and then they choose to stand on it, more power to you. But if it's invisible, which most runes tend to be, and it's just there, and it's basically, it's an idiot trap at low level. At high level, it's also an idiot trap, but it's survivable. It just chews resources up out of the group, and maybe that's the ultimate goal of the game. I'm going to have to talk about traps and lethality later, because that's an off-topic, which I've discussed at great lengths with a couple of GMs, and I've got some very interesting opinions on that, and I thought I'd like to share them with you. But I tend to kill player characters. I tend to do everything in my power to make them, keep them alive, realistically. If they're in a situation which promotes their death, then I'll do it. If you're dealing with an intelligent, evil bad guy, and he's just downed his opponent, they're on -2 hit points, they're slowly bleeding out. This is Pathfinder, by the way, or D&D. And the rest of the group are nowhere near to save them, and he wants this person dead because having this person alive is a massive inconvenience to him. He'll spin around and kill him. Why wouldn't he? It makes sense. And if a player was to come to me and say, why did you kill my character? I say, that's what he would have done. You know, if I can't contrive some way that doesn't smack of Deus Ex Machina to keep them alive, then I'll do that. If they're in the middle of a scrum, there's just this huge melee in the middle of this room and everyone's just like throwing themselves into this meat grinder and there's dead bodies everywhere, yeah, he's not going to coup de grace at that point. Basically, at that point, having been in a semi-mass battle situation myself with the reenactment stuff I've done, you know that when your opponent goes down, you immediately stop paying attention to them. And you scan the area for all the threats and targets, because at any moment a sword bloke can come swinging in on you, and if you have no idea it's coming, you're gonna cop it, and it's gonna hurt a lot. I've had that happen too, and in that scenario, the intelligent thing to do is to ignore your downed opponent, even if they're not dead, even if they're even conscious still. And they're just on the floor going, I'm in so much pain because someone just stabbed my liver. You know, even if they're doing that and they're not actually dead, they're just, you know, semi-incapacitated. They're on low hit points. They're combat ineffective, but not even close to dead, and they can easily be revived or healed. Even then, he's not going to spend time to kill them, because there's all these things going off around him. There's the confusion of the battle. Because I play on a tactile grid with models and such and so forth, it's very easy to forget that's the reality the character is in when it comes to that particular scenario. So there is that to bear in mind. Once again, if you piss off, shall we say, an assassin who's famous for offing people in the middle of the night, and you don't prepare for him turning up, even if it's just to put an alarm spell on the door and on the window, you know, even if you haven't gone that far, even if you haven't just put a tripwire up with a few tin cans on a piece of rope, then expect me to turn around and tell you, you don't wake up in the morning. But if you've made the effort, and you think to yourself, actually, there's a small possibility that assassin might come and get me now, pissed off, and he knows where I live, and he knows what I'm capable of as a fighter, so he knows attacking me out of my armour is a really good idea, then an intelligent player, I would like to think, would prepare, even if they're not particularly proficient in the art of not getting assassinated, which some characters tend not to be, but that's something else. You'd have to make the effort to not die, as it were, not to get arbitrarily killed. And that's something also. I think that's key, primarily the key thing. Actually, now I've just struck upon it mid-conversation, mid-sentence, in fact. Arbitrary death. Arbitrary death should be avoided at all costs unless it is justified. And it's going to be really hard to sell this as an idea to anybody, especially the guy who just had his character offed by the arbitrary death. But that's ultimately it, really. So, just to sum up, I suppose, surmise, it's been a long video and it's been a long recording process, so sorry about that, guys. But when it comes to lethality, get a consensus with your group. I tend to run the mid to low lethality games, but I will kill player characters for silly things, and when opportunity strikes and it seems logical for it to happen. When it comes to continuity, I will force continuity on the group, as a whole, because I'll not tend to focus my stories on one particular player unless it's a low player count game, like 1 or 2 players. I will not put the strain of an entire campaign and the longevity of an entire campaign on one person, because it's an awful lot waste of time when that one person dies and nobody can or wants to resurrect him. So aim it at the group. Think outside the box when it comes to introducing player characters. Approach a player who had his character just die and say, this is my idea, what do you think? And have them bounce. They might take the idea straight away, or have them bounce the ideas back at you, and you think to yourself, that could work, and be open with the idea. You know, maybe you didn't think having, you know, a pit slave in your Inquisitor group would be a really good idea. But if your character seems to convince on the idea and he gives you a half reasonable explanation for it, then yeah, run with it. You know, and you can work that. You can all work that, guys. We're all intelligent. We're all smart. We're all mature. Well, most of us are anyway. I'm not. And then when it comes to character death, I tend to run at the low end of scale. That's my own opinion. I tend not to want to kill player characters, even in systems where people assume the game is lethal, because that's how I roll. But I will, once again, kill player characters if it seems logical for it to happen. So that's my ideas, guys. Oh yeah, and I don't like to rely too much on Deus Ex Machina, because it can get a little bit tiresome very, very quickly. So thank you for your time, guys. It's been a long video, and for all you guys who stick to the end, thank you very much. Bye bye.